Well, good afternoon. Happy Friday, November 22nd. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. It is almost turkey time. I'm getting the stretchy pants ready, but until we get there, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with mortgage rates. Another not so great week. Mortgage rates hovering around the 7% range. I'll flip the screen around here. Here we go. This is the average 30-year fixed. Not the world's greatest week. Some of this coming on comments from our Federal Reserve, and I'm going to shift you back to the crazy days of September the 23rd of 2024, not that long ago, my friends, about 60 days ago, where Fed President Alan Goolsbee said he saw many more rate cuts ahead. This coming on the heels of the Federal Reserve's half-point Fed funds rate cut on September the 18th, and a lot of optimism that we would see many more rate cuts ahead after that. Matter of fact, that comment was pretty controversial because it gave rise to the idea that maybe the Fed will cut so much that their policy will be inflationary and we will see the long end of the yield curve start to increase. That comment was sort of widely publicized. And then we fast forward to this week. Again, we're talking about a 60-day window here. And we see the very same individual, Alan Goolsbee, come out and say that the pace of cuts may need to slow. So now we're on November the 21st, 2024, and the pace of Fed rate cuts may need to slow. And what's the reasoning behind all this? Well, certainly we've had an election between then and now. But if we scroll down the page, you're going to see some reference to inflation. And they'll talk about inflation not being down to 2% yet. But this is really about labor or jobs. Big swings in the monthly job market data may have shifted those views somewhat. So when we start talking about what's going to happen with interest rates, at least the interest rates that the Fed controls, going out into next year, it's really the labor market that we're talking about here. Listen, the Fed funds futures are now pricing in just a 55% chance that the Fed is going to cut in the middle of December. That's down from in the 80s. Thanks to comments made by Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on November the 14th. He basically said, listen, we may not need to cut as aggressively as we thought. We're in no rush. The pace of cutting can certainly slow down. And then those comments echoed here by Alan Goolsbee. Again, this is all coming 60 days after we cut the Fed funds rate by 0.5 point because we were almost certain that we were a little bit behind the curve. So let's talk about labor then. If it's really not about inflation, and trust me guys, it is not about inflation. If you take a look at the United States personal consumption expenditures year-over-year report, we are at 2.1% as of the last reading on Halloween, October the 31st. We were at 2.1%. What's the Fed's preferred metric for inflation? It's personal consumption expenditures. What's the Fed's target for inflation? It's 2%. Does the Fed have the ability to fine-tune to their rate cuts so inflation lands exactly at the target? No, Fed rate cuts are lagging. In other words, they're going to cut, and it's going to take time for the economic data to roll in. Some say as long as a year to a year and a half before the data is fully reflective of Fed cuts or Fed hikes. So at 2.1%, we are right there on inflation. It's the jobs data, it's the labor data that is causing the Fed to have concern about the pace of cuts. So let's talk about that labor data for just a brief moment. I'm going to switch to a different screen here, and I'm going to show you a chart of mortgage-backed securities for the entire year overlaid with the non-farm payroll data that comes out once per month. So in other words, here we go back to January. We reported data in January for the month of December of 2023 of 216,000 jobs created. Here in February, we reported 353,000, and take a look at what happened to mortgage-backed securities on the day. Huge sell-off. Why did we have a huge sell-off? We had very strong labor creation. That gives the Fed a little concern that inflation could reignite, start to go back up. That's not good news for mortgage interest rates. That's why you saw mortgage-backed securities sell off, just like they did here, just like they did here, just like they did here. And really here, when we got some weaker non-farm payroll report, you can see this weak report actually reversed a sell-off trend, pushing mortgage-backed securities higher and rates lower. And then again, another strong labor report out here in early October. And then we got that very weak report here towards November 1st. This impacted somewhat by the hurricanes and the strikes. This one will remain to be seen. But when we really get into looking at these non-farm payroll reports, let's take a look at this chart. This blue line represents the headline number. This is the number that everyone pays attention to. 353,000 jobs created, 272,000 jobs created, 254. This green line is the revision, and these numbers go through two sets of revisions. So this is through the final set of revisions. Did we really create 353? Nope, we actually only created 256. We go to a month like June. Did we really create 206? No, we actually created 118. But by the time you get through 2 months worth of revisions, no one cares. They're looking at this number. They're not looking at this number any longer. And if you strip out government job creation, right, this yellow line is without government jobs, look at how little employment we are creating in the private sector. In fact, if you look at October, we actually contracted. We lost 28,000 jobs if you subtract out government job creation for the month of October. We'll see where the revisions come in. We're going to be getting those soon within the next couple of weeks. But you can see our labor picture not as robust as many would think, but if you're just focused on that headline job number, and if you really trust the labor data we're receiving, boy, it makes it very complex to try to figure out. Now listen, I'm not some sort of conspiracy theorist. I don't think everyone's out to get us. But if our Federal Reserve is going to change their stance on policy in a 60-day window from seeing many more rate cuts to the point that the market thinks they may be inflationary to now saying, I don't know that we see that many more rate cuts, and maybe we need to slow the pace of rate cuts based upon job creation, well, we really need to take a look at the data. And the job creation data for the non-farm payrolls comes from a survey. It's called the Establishment Survey, right? And the Establishment Survey response rate has been declining over the years. We're getting fewer and fewer and fewer responses on the backside of the pandemic. Why is anyone's guess? But ultimately, if you take a really good look at this data, you can see a lot of inherent flaws, especially in that initially published number that everyone reacts to. And those revisions that come in 30 and 60 days later are markedly different almost every single month. In fact, I think it's 9 out of the past 12 months we've seen negative revisions to the non-farm payrolls number, calling into question the true strength of the United States labor market. If I can be of any service to you over the weekend, don't hesitate to reach out. Mark.Milam at highlandmtg.com.